Today, we are talking about the best European power metal band, Helloween. I'm not really a big fan of European power metal in general. Most bands are either really cheesy or really generic, but Helloween are one of the few European power metal bands that I've really liked. You may think they are cheesy, but they do it right. They are very consistent. They've always had amazing guitarists, and all three of their vocalists are some of the best voices in power metal. Today I will rank all 15 of their albums from worst to best, so let's get started. I think Helloween are cheesy in a good way, but not for this album. This album is way too cheesy for me, which is why I don't really like it. The melodies do not reach me, and there are a lot of underwhelming songs, especially for the last song, Nothing to Say, which is definitely their worst epic song. I have nothing more to say for that song, but this album does have some good tracks, my favorites being Liar, Never Be a Star, and my favorite song Open Your Life. Overall, this isn't a terrible album. If you like cheesy European power metal, you will definitely like this, but this album does not reach me as much as their other stuff. That album title alone makes this album scream cheesy and stupid. Just like Rabbit Don't Come Easy, this album has a stupid title, and is really cheesy, but I do kinda like this album. I really love Michael Kiska's voice. He does a fantastic job on this album, just like he's always done on everything, but I find this album to be really cheesy. It's kind of power metal, but there are a ton of moments on here that scream pop. I honestly cannot stand Heavy Metal Hamsters, number 1, and I'm Doing Fine Crazy Man. But everything else is either okay or pretty awesome. My favorite tracks are Kids of the Century, The Chance, and my favorite is the epic song Mankind. Overall, this is a good album. There are definitely some great songs on here, but this album feels really disjointed. It's way too poppy and cheesy for a metal direction, and I wish they never went in this direction in the first place. Chameleon is an interesting album. It's definitely really weird, but I think it's underrated. It's still pretty pop and mainstream like Pink Bubbles, but they do it a lot better on here. The style is a lot more progressive and experimental, and the melodies work a lot better on here. There are a lot of amazing tracks on here, but there are some bad songs, which is why this is very low on my list. For example, Windmill is very boring and generic, music also sucks. Crazy Cat is bizarre, and In the Night isn't very special, but everything else is either good or amazing. The album opens up with First Time, which is very catchy and awesome. When the Sinner is also great, and this album has a lot of awesome epics, one of them being I Believe. What a crushing epic song this is. But my favorite song on this album is one of their best tracks ever, which is the melodic epic Giants. This song is so good. I think Chameleon is a really underrated album. If those 4 bad songs weren't included, honestly this would be one of their best. I really like the creative and progressive direction of this, and a ton of songs have amazing melodies. Give this a second chance if you don't like it. Straight Out of Hell is a decent album. Overall, I think the Andy Darris era is awesome and underrated. Pretty much all albums after Chameleon except for Rabbit Don't Come Easy is pretty good, but Straight Out of Hell is probably my least favorite out of the modern albums. It's still really good, but it has a bit of issues. The songwriting can get a little disjointed on here. There are a few sections where it suddenly gets dark and weird, with down-tuned guitars, and then it goes into a really happy melody. There are lots of parts in a few of these songs that do not fit in, but for the songs that do make sense and follow a simple song structure, those are the better songs on here. My favorite tracks would be the epic opening Nabataya, Far From the Stars, Church Breaks Down, and my favorite song Straight Out of Hell. Overall, this is a good album, but there are a few weird and bad songs on here which makes this not as good as the rest of their stuff. My God-Given Right is pretty similar to Straight Out of Hell, but it is a bit better. There are a few weird and cheesy songs, but there are a lot of epic and themic songs on here, more so than the last album, and there are a lot of memorable solos from Michael Wickott. The best tracks on here would be Battles Won, Russian Rule, You Still of War, and my favorite song would be the epic Creatures in Heaven. Overall, this is a decent album. It only has a few fillers, but there are tons of epic stuff on here. This album is pretty good. It has a lot of heavy epic songs, some of them being my favorites from this era, but this album does have a few issues. It has some bad songs, and there are some weird songwriting moments that do not fit in. This album is a bit too long and it definitely could have been trimmed, but when this album hits, it hits hard. My favorite tracks being the epic The King for 1,000 Years, which is definitely not as good as their other 13-minute epics, but it's still awesome. Invisible Man is also really good, Silent Rain, and my favorite song has to be Pleasure Drone. Overall, this album does have a lot of kick-ass material, but the bad and mediocre tracks puts this album lower on my list. Now we are getting into the awesome albums from Helloween. I really like Gambling with the Devil. It's a very good consistent album with barely any flaws. The main issue I have with it is the song Can Do It. That song absolutely sucks, but the rest is really good. This is one of their heavier albums. The production is heavy and a lot of these songs have fast killer riffs. My favorite songs would be the killer opening track Kill It, Paint a New World, The Saints, Dream Bound, and the best song is the epic closing track Heaven Tells No Lies.
I just know a step ahead and try harder than before, but I deny. Always when I try a step, something's gonna hold me back. Back to where I started, I just bumped my head instead.
Overall, Gambling with the Devil is a really awesome album with great performances from everybody. Honestly, this album might have Andy Darris's best vocal performance. This was right when he sounded the most rough and powerful in my opinion. This album is easily one of the better ones from the modern era. In my opinion, Seven Sinners is the best Helloween album of the modern era, mainly because it is really heavy. A lot of the songs are really fast and have intense drumming, some songs even pushing into thrash metal. Also, there are no bad songs whatsoever, mainly a few weaker ones, but overall this album is solid. If you really like Helloween's heavier and darker material like Walls of Jericho or The Dark Ride, you will like this. Andy Darris also sounds really rough and badass. My favorite tracks would be Are You Metal, Who is Mr. Madman, If a Mountain Could Talk, and my favorite song would be the insanely heavy Long Live the King.
Long live the
If you like Helloween in a darker and heavier style, I would highly recommend this album. Just an awesome kick-ass record. The Helloween albums in the mid to late 90s are what I consider to be the best from the Andy Darris era. Master of the Rings is one of them. This album kicks ass. It's a little bit different from their other power metal releases, mainly because they still were experimenting with original ideas like they were in Chameleon. Listen to Perfect Gentleman and the game is on to fully see what I mean. Pretty much every track is great. It's only lower because it's a bit different, but it doesn't make this album bad in any means. My favorite tracks would probably be Mr. Ego, the awesome opening track Soul Survivor, Still We Go, and my favorite song would be the catchy as hell Why. Overall, Master of the Rings is awesome, but honestly I wouldn't start here if you are just getting into the Andy Darris era since it is a bit different, but I would not avoid this album either. The Dark Ride is an amazing album. This is definitely a more dark and heavier album from them and it stands out in their discography. The production sounds outstanding. Probably my favorite Helloween production. The guitars sound really heavy, since they downtuned them all the way to drop B in some songs. The melodies are also a bit more depressing sounding, but it still sounds like classic Helloween. There are a ton of unique songs on here. One song I really like is the ballad If I Could Fly. The melodies are very good while having that dark atmosphere.
If I could fly like a king of the sky, could not top no fall, I would picture it all. If I could fly, see the world from my eyes.
My other favorite tracks would be the awesome Mr. Torture, Salvation, We Damn the Night, and my favorite song on here is actually my favorite song from the Andy Darris era, that being the epic title track The Dark Ride. What a masterpiece of a song this is.
Is there any any wonder why we came about? Was it for love or to let sin abound? Isn't it a wonder? Awake from blood-thick dreams.
The Dark Ride is a very good album to me and is definitely one of the best Andy Darris albums. If you like Helloween really heavy and not as cheesy, I would highly recommend this album. Better Than Raw is a very good album. I find this one to be one of the best from this era. There are just so many awesome melodic songs, but also having lots of heavy moments. The production sounds great on here. The heavy moments are especially shown in the opening track Push, which is very heavy for Helloween. My favorite tracks would probably be Falling Higher, Midnight Sun, A Handful of Pain, and my favorite song is the heavy epic song Revelation. I love how this track was written. It's really fast and heavy, but it has a long middle section full of badass solos, one of their best epics. Overall, this album is amazing. This is definitely a must listen if you're getting into the Andy Darris era. There are so many good tracks on here. Walls of Jericho is absolutely legendary. I absolutely love this album. This was pretty much the first European power metal album, and it's more like speed metal in a few areas. This is their fastest and probably heaviest album from Helloween. Every song absolutely rips. A lot of them are really fast, having some crazy powerful riffs, and Kai Hansen does vocals on this album. I find his voice to be really good, especially in the high register. Kai Hansen and Michael Wickott are the perfect Helloween songwriting duel to me, especially Kai Hansen. The best tracks on here would be the epic How Many Tears, Heavy Metal Is the Law, which it is, Phantoms of Death, and my favorite song would be the awesome opening track, Ride the Sky. I also want to talk about the self-titled EP for a moment. It's not an album but more like leftovers from Walls of Jericho. I think it is just okay, not as good as most tracks from Walls of Jericho, but there is a song that fucking rules on it, which is the incredibly badass Cry for Freedom. I urge all Helloween fans who haven't heard this EP yet to check out this song. It is so amazing and is better than most songs from Walls of Jericho. Overall, Walls of Jericho is a badass album and was definitely influential to the power metal scene. This is an essential Helloween album. I love The Time of the Oath. This is such an incredible and outstanding album, and I consider it to be a masterpiece. Every single song is awesome, and there's 12 of them. This is my favorite Andy Darris album mainly because there are so many standouts. All of these tracks have a lot of great melodies and epic moments, and also some outstanding guitar work. There are so many great tracks on here like Steel Tormentor, the title track, Power, and one track I really love is actually a huge hit off of this album, almost as popular as Helloween's most popular tracks, and that is Forever and One. My favorite song on this album though would have to be Kings Will Be Kings. This song is so epic and the melodies are so awesome. But this album does have one issue, but it's one I can get behind and not have it bug me too much, and that is the production. It sounds pretty unproduced and faint. I don't know why they mixed it like that, especially when Master of the Rings and Better Than Raw sound way better, but it's not too horrible and it definitely doesn't ruin the music. Overall I love this album and I consider it to be a masterpiece. If you want to listen to a Helloween album without Michael Kiske, start here for sure. You really can't go wrong with the original Keeper albums from Helloween. Both parts are some of the greatest power metal albums of all time. Let's talk about the second part first. This album is so amazing. This album and part 1 has the best Helloween lineup, which has both Kai Hansen and Michael Kiske. Kai Hansen really makes these albums shine with his awesome songwriting. Part 2 has so many memorable moments on it. Michael Kiske does a fantastic vocal performance and the solos are so amazing. Both are shown very well in one of my favorite tracks, Eagle Fly Free. My other favorite tracks from this amazing album would be We Got the Right, the incredibly catchy I Want Out, and my favorite song is my favorite Helloween song of all time, which is Keeper of the Seven Keys. This 13-minute epic is one of the most well-crafted songs ever. The melodies are so amazing and the song has so many parts to it.
You're the keeper of the seven keys that lock up the seven seas, and the seal of his head set before he was blind. Hide them from demons and rescue mankind.
Overall, this whole entire album is phenomenally good. If you haven't heard these albums yet, you are completely missing out on great music.
Got so much fire inside, so fire on my brain. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive.
To me, Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 is their best album. This one just flows the best in my opinion. There is only 6 songs, but all of them are very good and flow really nicely. There is also more diversity than Part 2, with this album having a ballad which is very good. All of these tracks are very memorable to me and have some of Helloween's best guitar work and soloing. And you also get Michael Kiske doing amazing vocals. This is the definitive Helloween album for me. It really cannot get better than this. One song that stands out here is Twilight of the Gods. What an awesome song this is.
Tonight, our gods are fighting and they look burning out. Doomsday has come, and there is no place to hide.
My other favorite tracks would include I'm Alive, A Tale That Wasn't Right, and my favorite song Just Like Part 2 is the ending 13-minute epic, Helloween. This would be my second favorite Helloween song. This band is on another level for writing two 13-minute epics on back-to-back albums. Overall, this album and Part 2 are masterpieces and are some of the best albums in power metal. These are essential power metal records. So that wraps up the ranking on all the Helloween albums. What an amazing band. There are so many awesome albums from them. Even the ones ranked last have some great songs. If you want to get into power metal, I'd start with Helloween. They're definitely the best European power metal band in my opinion. Thank you guys for watching and make sure you subscribe if you like my content.